What's up, Tweeners? Welcome back to another Tweener tennis video today here on the channel. And today we have another great video with our WTA insider, David Kane, who writes for tennis.com and Tennis Magazine. Before we get into this video, I have to remind you, after we recorded this video, Ash Barty announced her retirement. So I'm just letting you guys know that now before you guys start commenting. But Ash Barty's retired, blah, 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 blah. Just want to make that clear for you guys. So if you guys do enjoy this type of content, make sure to leave a like on this video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're trying to hit 3,000 by the end of this month, and we're trying to hit 5K at some point this year. So hopefully you guys can join the channel. We are now also starting to offer memberships, which you can join, and it gives you the opportunity to possibly come on the channel as well as a viewer, as a fan, as a supporter, to join live streams that we do commentating on live matches. So would love to have you guys join the channel. Make sure to leave a like, make sure you're subscribed, and let's get into our WTA update with our WTA insider, David Kane.
All right, we could be here for literally 3 hours talking about the WTA. So welcome everyone. Since
ready.
we last spoke, this is our monthly, I would say, recap of what's been happening on the WTA Tour. And we have our WTA insider person from Tennis Magazine, David. So David, walk us through what's been happening. And then I will jump in whenever I don't even know what this is. I'm jumping.
We're going over the over the ladder.
Going over the side.
We're so clever.
So please, what have we noticed so far?
I feel like we have, there's a point in Real Housewives production that Andy Cohen will say, we have a season. And I feel like at this point, we have a season when it comes to WTA tennis. I did not feel that way after Australia. Things felt very much up in the air when we spoke. I felt like I needed more data points. I wanted to see how trends were going to either persist or change after that swing, because it just felt like there was so many question marks. And in many ways, I feel like we've achieved like a return a bit to stasis. And that's weird to say after a tournament that featured neither the world number one or world number two, to say that, oh, it's a normal swing, that that the top two players are not a factor at all. But it feels like the sort of mush that has been the top 10. I spoke about this with Alex Gruskin yesterday, just this sort of coalescing into sort of a group A and a group B. And in your group A, you have your Barty, your Swiatek, Paula Maria Sakkari, Simona Halep, Alyona Ostapenko, and Annette Kontaveit. Like, these are players who are you can kind of look to at the beginning of each tournament and think, okay, I have a reasonable shot of expecting you to do well. And then there's a group B, or whether it's your Amanda Anisimovas, your Marketa Vondrousovas, players who are in that sort of B squad who have not really asserted themselves in a major way, but are players who you could expect a big upset from, someone who can really streak and take out a big name. But at least after the BNP Paribas Open, we're starting to get a sense of who is really contesting for these major titles for the rest of the season. I didn't feel that way after Australia. So there's good things to report in the month since we've spoken.
Well, I think the word that we were looking for, and right before I started recording this, was the consistency. Like, in terms of players that we now can be considered in that A tier, quote unquote, like you said. And I think the first player that comes to mind, it has to be Maria Sakkari. Because after Australia, for me at least, I didn't feel like she showed her real potential. And then all of a sudden at Indian Wells, she's like, okay, let me just go on a run and just dominate. And then Swiatek as well. Swiatek, we didn't see that. And she, for 3 straight rounds at Indian Wells too, she came back from a set down. And it takes a real, what's the word I'm looking for? A mental toughness that everyone has really kind of thrown at her, because if you listen to any broadcast that involves Iga Swiatek, it involves someone mentioning her mental coach that travels with her. So please.
Yeah, going back to Sakkari and Swiatek, I feel like those were two players who, in many ways, I felt like were performing about par after Australia. Those were the two players I was worried about the least in 2 different ways, because I didn't really feel that Sakkari was going to back up her 2021, certainly not as well as she's done it so far. And I thought that Swiatek was making good improvements, but I wasn't expecting the big breakthrough that we really started to see in Doha and Indian Wells. And I think what's so great about Swiatek is, we saw the juxtaposition against Clara Towson, who feels significantly younger than Iga, yet they're only a year apart. And that speaks to the tremendous amount of experience that Iga has picked up over the years. And I think over the last 18 months, and at the same time, as for as much experience as she has amassed, she's still learning on the job. And I think that set down statistic is proof of that. This is not something that she was successful doing last year, coming back from a set down. She's done it so much in the last couple of weeks. And I think that that is just another thing that she has learned to conquer as sort of this player learning on the job. And I think that that's only going to make her more dangerous. You know, yes, she's really mentally tough. She doesn't get dark, you know, as frustrated as I might have been at various points of that semifinal against Simona Halep.
Yeah.
She really kept it together and really let Simona, who is significantly more experienced, really implode on herself. And so that just sort of speaks to just sort of the serenity within the Swiatek center. I mean, she did a column for BBC in Australia about how she was trying to explore some of her emotions. And if she lets them out on court, it's not bad. I didn't really think that that was a great tack for her to be taking. But at the same time, I think she's just sort of coming into her own as a complete player. She's someone who's always had seemingly a complete game. And now she's developing a complete mental and physical game, which is sort of fascinating to see a player sort of evolve from, you know, wonderkind to elder statesman at still only 20 years old.
Well, what shocks me from what you just said is her talking about her emotion, because again, something that we easily equip Alcaraz to Nadal with the sleeveless look, we have the Swiatek to Rafa obsession, right? And her mental ability to kind of, she uses that to her advantage, what she has for her mental capacity. And just like Rafa, even though Rafa was in terrible pain, he shows emotion no matter what. And he did at Indian Wells. And Swiatek, I think we saw a little bit more of that during the, was it during the Halep semifinal or the Sakari final, that she really showed frustration and she was human. Like she really, it wasn't just fist pumps and quiet. It was, why am I hitting that shot? Why am I not kind of going for that? And I think that really helped her win, to be honest, because that's something that she needs to kind of let go of.
Isn't that a fascinating wrinkle to the GOAT debate of which of the young generation are really playing most like Federer, Nadal, Djokovic? The two of the more successful players on both the men's and women's side are such huge Rafa stands. Like that's sort of like a weird, I mean, I guess you like tactically you would think that players would be modeling themselves after a Novak Djokovic because he plays such sort of the quintessential modern game, and it is shown in its longevity and its sort of stability on both wings. And yet I think we're seeing the two most exciting youngsters on both sides of the tour really modeling their fighting spirit, sort of even that heavy topspin forehand. I mean, it is very Rafa. And so that's been interesting to watch from both Alcaraz and Swiatek. I mean, listen, I think in Indian Wells, the conditions certainly favored Swiatek, but it was really up to her to embrace them and sort of prove herself to become this sort of player for all surfaces. And now she's, you know, it's almost, in a way, it's kind of irrelevant what she does in Miami because she's got such a tremendously fruitful swing, you know, coming up on her in terms of clay and a lot of potential points to pick up. This race for number one is starting to get interesting as well. I mean, after Australia, there was no one remotely challenging Ash Barty, and she's still ahead by quite a lot, but now Iga is probably the closest challenger.
Well, she wins Miami, she becomes number one.
If she wins Miami, that's what I'm saying. But if we go into the clay season by barely being behind Barty, are you really going to fact check me on that? I am, because I feel like I would have noticed that. And I feel like someone would have told me. I feel like someone would have said, heads up, Barty's not going to be. No, I mean, at least according to the live rankings, it's 67, it'd be 67-11. She'd still be behind by about 200 points. And now you might be factoring into Stuttgart.
Yes.
If the Stuttgart points fall off before.
Yes. Plus, Barty's losing her points regardless because she's not playing.
Right.
So she would still be, if she wins, she would still be behind by 200.
Yes.
But I think the fact of the matter is, going into a clay season where both players have won the French Open, that title race is going to get really, really close.
I mean, listen, if Iga Swiatek wins Doha, Indian Wells, and Miami back to back like that, I mean, regardless of whether she is number one on paper, she'll be considered to be the
Yeah.
de facto number one. And I think that's
Of
going to
course.
be an even more fascinating conversation, because I think a lot of what has been ascribed to Barty on the back half of her, Australian Open swing, I think we'll start to narratively shift towards Swiatek, that sort of that fighting spirit, that, how do you beat this player? I think Iga presents an even more interesting challenge aesthetically and also tactically.
Well, the next person I wanted to talk about in the top 10 was Sabalenka, who basically just crashed out of the top 3 like it was nothing. And I know it seems like you have a lot to say about this, but before I get to you, I just wanted to point out that how she lost to Jasmine Paolini is beyond me. It's funny because you would think she would still be in that top 5 race no matter what, but this couldn't be a worse start for her for the 2022 season.
I mean, she shouldn't be crashing as far down as she is on the
She's
WTA
6.
rankings. It has so much to do with just sort of the changeability and the fact that everyone is so evenly matched right now in terms of points, and we're still not getting that. I mean, we're starting to get it now a little bit with Badosa and Sakari and Swiatek, a little bit, but it's still like every time someone has a big result, they're shooting up the rankings. I mean, we had Annette Kontaveit, threatening to be number 2, 3 in the world a few weeks ago, and that seemed like a foregone conclusion before she took her early loss in Indian Wells. I mean, I think that's sort of like the sort of a perfect storm for Sabalenka, just not playing her best tennis, seemingly getting it a little bit together in Australia, a little bit together in the Middle East, but it's just proving to be not enough. And it's disappointing because, this was someone who for the second year in a row, I thought was a shoo-in to really start challenging for major titles. And it seems like there's always something, and whereas with, when you're competing against players who are as complete in many ways as Swiatek, as Badosa, as Sakari, to maybe a lesser extent because Sakari is not a naturally offensive player in the way that Sabalenka is, but Sakari beat her in Guadalajara. So I mean, like that's another player that, can figure out the Sabalenka game.
Yeah.
When it's not firing on all cylinders. So Sabalenka finds herself in a tricky spot. I mean, if she's always seems like she's happy, it's certainly an image that she presents on social media. And I hope that that's the case. She's going to play doubles with Paula in Miami, which I think is fun. Hopefully maybe she should play some more doubles. I know she wanted to play less because it was taking focus off her singles, but maybe the doubles keeps her loose. I mean, we saw that happen with Dinara Safina back in 2007, 2008. When she stopped playing doubles, she became a lot more tense on the singles court. So, not to be one of those team tennis people, but doubles always helps your singles.
No, but her combo with Mertens always, I think, helped her a little bit just figure out her game to not be alone on the court, which seems to be her struggle as of right now. Mertens still in the top 30, 25 as of right now. And it's kind of crazy how she, and everything you said, I'm agreeing with. I don't think there's a thing or someone that can say that would disagree with you, because being out of the top 5 for her and having Kontaveit literally breathing down her neck, who could possibly overtake her this tournament. Is Pliskova playing Miami? Yes. She is. Yes. Do you think she'll go far? Because I want to preface that with this next statement.
I think Pliskova will go far. I don't know. She didn't.
Do you think she'll make the quarters?
We've seen her play one match all year, and it was sort of like a choke fest. So I feel like she still needs some time. So I think it's hard to predict. I would put Pliskova in the same boat as Muguruza. Muguruza's played a lot more than Pliskova and is similarly as big still of a question playing, mark.
And she's still a giant question mark of where the hell did she go? Also, feel like I haven't talked about Danielle Collins in a hot minute, because she's definitely not going to be in the top 10 anytime soon. Well, she is, but I think she'll crash out soon. No. Well, we all know that. And also, I wanted to talk about Raducanu for a hot second, because the Porsche sponsorship that just came out, her being a brand ambassador for Porsche, it's another fucking reason that I think this is getting out of hand.
Is it? I had somebody tell me that they thought it was skin crawling because they just felt that it was
what do you mean by skin crawling?
Because it was because it's capitalizing on a player who the bottom can fall out on her career very soon. And it just seems like one more element of pressure that if and when she doesn't defend the US Open, it's, oh, this Porsche ambassador, she's been lauded with all these sponsorships and she was seen as the next global name and it didn't work out. And it's a lot of pressure to put on her. But at the same time, I
do you
feel
care
like
that much?
two minds about it.
Yeah.
Well, do I care? I mean, of course of course I care, but at the same time, I don't know what Emma's end game is necessarily. Like,
no one does.
I would love to know what she sees for herself. I think she seems to be, it's weird to compare her to Sabalenka in this instance, but she seems like someone who is, in good spirits, is, in good state of mind. If she's
always in a positive place.
Yeah, I mean, she was laughing when she lost that match to, when she got outplayed by Rybakina earlier this year. I mean, it's maybe she is has a better sense of where she believes her game is than maybe what everybody else expects of her. I mean, expectations are only bad if you start to internalize them and really let them wreck with your mind. But I think if she's someone who feels like, I'm working on this and, I'm making the money that I can make right now. And if, things don't work out for me at the end of the year, I can go back to the drawing board. She's someone who comes from, a very strong tennis media apparatus. Does she see herself being, an analyst, a commentator, a Joe Dury or a Sam Smith, these players who were, solid, talented players who made transitions into, really successful media careers. I don't know where Emma sees herself in 5 to 8 years, but I think right now, looking at her as a pro competing with this tour, she still has a lot to learn and a lot to catch up with. And I think as long as she's aware of that and knows that she's going to, move at her own pace, I don't really worry about sort of the long term for her.
It's funny that you say that too, because I'm thinking the person that she's currently ranked behind is Ostapenko, and the immediate thought of that. And that was one of the big things that we talked about in our first recap of the WTA Tour, with Ostapenko having a great year so far. Right. Mm-hmm. But Ostapenko was the same way. Maybe she just doesn't have the media coverage that Raducanu has, where she's sponsored by the biggest brands in the world. So if she doesn't get that, she's going to be, if she drops off like Ostapenko did for a couple of years, I think it's going to be a much harder task for Raducanu to come out of that media spiral than it did for Ostapenko.
Well, they have I would say they have two very different mindsets. I mean, I feel like Ostapenko's always believed that she was the best and still believes that she's the best to this very day. I don't know where Emma's, headspace is. And at the same time, the fact that she does come from this firm foundation, I don't see a situation where she loses hypothetically the first round of the US Open and she loses all her endorsements. I mean, I think.
Oh yeah, that's just not realistic at that point.
I think she'll always have a bit of a cushion and maybe that won't necessarily motivate her to be at her best all the time, because she knows that she's, making good income, on and off the court, or just or mostly off the court if the on-court results aren't happening. But I don't know. I mean, at least the fact that she pushed Petra Martic to 3 sets, the fact that she didn't close out that match, not great, but
wasn't good at all.
It's, we're looking towards the next couple of months. It feels like this is going to be an important week for her in Miami, because then she's moving to clay. She's never really played on clay professionally before.
We've never seen her play on any other surface besides hard court and maybe a little bit of Wimbledon.
Yeah. I mean, so she certainly has a few more months to figure it out. And maybe the clay will, help her game a little bit, because it is going to be a slower bouncing surface. She'll be able to absorb some more pace against some of the bigger hitters who, remained, a challenge for her to start the season. She's a tough one to really prognosticate about, because there's still so little that we still know so very little about her.
100%. And I think the last person that I want to talk about who's playing her first match in a very long time is Osaka. Thoughts?
In a long time. Well, she's
you know what I mean.
She just played in Indian Wells. I don't know.
She's 98. She's 98 in the world right now. She had to get a wild card to play this.
I'm glad she's here, first of all, because I think.
Are you in Miami?
Huh? No.
Are you...
in New York. I'm glad she's in Miami. I'm glad she's there. I'm glad one of us is there.
None of us are here. None of us.
She took the plane down. I hope she stops by Publix. But when based on how she exited Indian Wells, I wasn't sure we were going to see her in Miami, just because, when when things have, sort of spiraled out of control for Naomi, it sort of, precipitates sort of a big break from the schedule. And so the fact that she's coming back, she's, sort of exposure therapy at this point. The more you're out there, the better it is, because I don't know if the breaks are helping necessarily. And so I think she's another one that she's one of the best players in the world. She's one of the best ball strikers in the world. She's one of the best competitors in the world when her head is on, and she's got a good mindset, but that was a tough one, not only because of what happened to her in Indian Wells, but because of who it happened against. If you're going to have, no disrespect to Kudermetova, but I think she's one of those players who you would think if you're going to have like sort of a mental lapse, you maybe want to have it against Kudermetova, just because that's historically she's a player that can lose some of these tight matches. But the fact that she was not able to figure a way out of that second set, and the fact that she was able to let Kudermetova close it out the way that she did, not super awe-inspiring, but it's
true.
Yeah.
I would like to just touch on very briefly on what Osaka did after her match, because I've never seen her. There were only a couple people that would be able to ask the umpire or the WTA official, can I talk to the audience after I lose? She
wanted to address the crowd during the match. Like repeatedly, like it was
sort of a surreal. Does that say more about her like focus, or does that say more about her just as a person?
I think once she decided that was what the match was about, I don't know if she gave her 100%. I don't know if she could, because at that point you're so, I don't want to say fixated, because it sounds like it's a negative connotation, but she became so focused on this one element of the match that, and it became this bigger deal, and she wasn't able to translate that energy into winning tennis. And so, yes, she did get to have her say. The one thing that did worry me a little bit was the fact that the way that she said that I was watching the 2001 footage, it wasn't clear when she had watched it. Like, was she watching it
recently or was it?
Because
it was on the forefront of her head.
Like, that doesn't seem like the kind of thing, like before you go to a tournament that you then go to watch this sort of thing and then have that. Because then it seems like you're then prepared to, you're extra sensitive to something like that happening. Thinking of Venus and Serena, it was certainly a lot worse with the experience. So it was a little rough in some respects to compare the two incidences.
It's very different.
But if you're prepared for that kind of energy, and if you feel that, it makes it harder to get it out of your mind. So I would hope that, maybe she's staying on. I think, for someone who's a very online person, Naomi seems to be, I hope that she's maybe putting the phone away, putting the social media away, because I don't know how healthy it is, because I think she's someone who just internalizes so much. And, there's so much that needs to be really addressed between her and her team that has not happened yet. She hasn't had a lot of time to address it because there has been such a meteoric rise over the last 4 years, but she has had time. She has had lockdowns, extended breaks, hiatuses, where maybe there could have been some kind of intervention. But it's, the time is ticking. She's someone who could have really been racking. This is her prime time. Prime period to be racking up a lot of slams. You look back to the end of 2019, early 2020, you think of Osaka, Barty, Andreescu, Kenin. 3 of those 4 have been virtually absent from the tour basically since the end of 2020. And that's a shame, because that was really starting to shape up to be that de facto top 5. And that's why I think we're in such a period of
limbo.
Confusion. And limbo, because we just don't know who the next stars are, because the obvious names are not featuring at the top of the game right now.
I totally agree. And David, as much as I want to continue this conversation, we're going to have to cut it short right now. Thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Before you go, who's your winner for Miami?
I go with what everyone's been telling me is Paula Badosa. I'm hearing great things about her.
Love that. Love it.
I didn't want to pick her myself.
She is great. She is a lovely, lovely lady. Well,
lovely lady.
David, thank you for joining us today. Make sure to follow David on Twitter. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thanks, guys. There's the nod.